It's the Lean Into Art Cast, a show where a couple visual storytellers get to... A couple of... Rob, we're out of shape. I'm out of shape. This is a show where some visual storytellers get together, talk about a topic, usually more eloquently than what I just did, and try to look at it from every angle and then put it into some kind of practical use. We think hard about visual storytelling, so you will too. My name is Jersey Droz, cartoonist and teaching artist. The other host is...
Hi, I'm Rob Stenzinger. I am a designer, coder, and facilitator.
Facilitator, that's a new one that you're adding onto the repertoire.
Yeah.
What's a facilitator do?
A facilitator helps be it's kind of like a rodeo clown for conversations.
So you distract and then get out of the way?
Yeah, totally. I egg people on, and then they start throwing pies, and I'm like, whoop, 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 you missed me, you know, and they throw more pies. And then creativity and clever ideas come out of it.
So this is your first time listening to the show, watching the show.
Mm-hmm.
The gist is that I make comic books and I teach comics. Rob makes a lot of things. He makes games. He makes books about making games. He makes software. You made comics, and then also, like when you say facilitator, yeah, you're also somebody who does problem solving through interpersonal. So not conflict resolution necessarily. You're not like solving hostage situations, but
yeah, I mean, it's definitely not phone calls and beads of sweat and threat of explosions or whatnot. It's merely trying to set up like safe places where people can get together and have fun, getting creative for big and small ideas, and how do you get those ideas out and explored in a consistent way where everyone present feels like, oh yeah, I think we know what we're going to do here. We're going to build a system that does this thing and that thing, but not this other thing. And then, but to test these ideas, we're going to, do these two things. And that's what I do. So it's in particular, so obviously facilitators can do all sorts of different things. It's typically toward exploring a business hypothesis that deals with something probably digital as well. And but that stuff can get super expensive if you're like, well, I want something that does 100 things and if it does 99 things, failure. And so hopefully through conversation you can say, well, if we did only 2 things, that would help us know if we should build the other 98. There you go.
That's some of the things that a facilitator does.
Yeah.
And
my gosh, so by the way, so whatever, we do a lot of stuff. You're very kind, Jersey. You also put on this giant event, this wonderful thing.
I was going to say,
comics.
I got a picture up on the screen. We were just together like a week ago.
I know.
And there we are. There you are writing me a ticket.
That's right. Well, that's because it was, I needed to show up in Ann Arbor, Michigan to pull you over for doing too many awesome things for the world of comics.
I can't drive 55, Rob.
Pal. Yeah, you and Sammy Hagar. So, yeah, I mean, that's a really huge thing that you're involved in. You're one of the organizers behind Kids Read Comics, which happens once a year for the last 7 years?
This was our 7th year doing it, yeah. Yeah.
Wow. So that'll be like a big part of what we talk about today, right?
Mm-hmm.
Exploring this Kids Read Comics 2015 and doing some reflection and discussion.
And some compare and contrasting, because this has also been a crazy month of conferences for us, because just 3 weeks ago, I was in Minneapolis. In the last episode, very last episode of the LIA Cast was, we were all on location for the IO Festival. So there's a lot of festival stuff going on. A lot of, getting together to level up our skills and to celebrate different things that we work really hard on. So hoping to have a discussion on, not only just a reflection on KRC 2015, because I'm sure there's some people out there, like some of the leaners who listen to the show, probably want to know how it went. Because I just got a message from a friend today who says, hey, how did KRC go? I couldn't quite piece together from your social media feeds, if it was a big success or not, right? So So I was like, oh wow, I thought I was sharing like high points, but because actually, for longtime listeners to the show, I need to pull up something. This is like the first big headline, right, right here, Rob.
Oh my word, that was surreal. I mean,
For those who are
only,
listening just in the audio, I've got a picture of Ryan Estrada of RyanEstrada.com, broken-telephone.com, who flew all the way from Korea.
Yeah,
not just to see us. He has family in Michigan,
no.
but
yeah, I mean, he was part of the whole Ann Arbor comics community before he then traveled all over the earth, right? And gathering some crazy and fun material for his comics, like oh man, what's the one where he thinks the end of the world's happening?
Oh yeah. Anyway. It's all on RyanEstrada.com.
Yeah,
but
obviously, so he's a world traveler. He settles down in Korea, and then you don't typically expect someone that you do podcasts from time to time. He's been on the show like 4 times, right? And you just don't expect someone like that to just be like, hey, no, now I'm in Ann Arbor, Michigan for a special event. That was super amazing to see him.
That was crazy. That was so great. I mean, so like I obliquely posted someplace or other like this weekend made it into the top 10. And like somebody was like, top 10 what? Good, bad? I was like, oh yeah. I was really tired when I posted it. I meant really good. Like top 10 amazing weekends. Such a good time. So okay, do we need to go? Are we gonna do curveball, or do we want to just go 10,000 feet up and talk about this thing and do the reflection?
Well, I was thinking we don't have to do like a regular curveball, but I just wanted to I want to hang a lampshade on something that like in the process I want to collaboratively hang a lampshade on it. So it's not really a curveball, other than so we're going to explore some of the ideas behind the event and some of our experiences, and do our normal thing of like taking a look at it at the high level during the 10,000 feet up section. So we'll talk about maybe some of the theory and ideas, but then we'll get practical in the on the ground section, right? And there's a lot to explore, because it's an event that probably seems familiar on the surface. You probably have seen these kinds of things like comic conventions, festivals, whatnot, and yet there's a lot of fun differences to explore, which we're going to have that covered. But one thing about doing this kind of event, or any event, like even like a large gathering at your house, to me is a lot of work, right? So the whole theme of like, hey, this is a lot of work, that's not really what we're going to cover here. It's not like, oh, let's talk about the amazing effort that Jersey and the rest of the people who organize the event go through, and all of the volunteers and the organizations that support it, whatnot. There's a lot that just goes without saying. So I just
it really
point
does.
it out.
It feels like that's like a no-brainer, right? It's like,
Yeah.
guess what? Putting on a festival or a convention or whatever you want to call it, like, is work. There we go.
There you go. Lampshade hung.
But yeah, but what's interesting to me is talking about what the artist, you and I, go through going to these things, both as a participant and an organizer, and navigating the sort of the middle world that we both live in, right?
Midgard?
Just to frame it up a little bit. I went to IO, and there was IO is a design and coding conference with a heavy emphasis on the coding, right? When I went to the unconference at the beginning, I mean, it was really about diversity in coding. To which there's a part of me that's saying, like, what am I doing here, right? Am I going to run into like friction because it's like, I make comics, and I wound up finding where I like what tracks I sort of could swim in. Same thing with KRC. KRC is specifically a comics convention. Now, you've made comics, but you're also a coder and designer, right? You're an odd duck. You're a unicorn. You're a weird thing. There's a lot of people come to KRC who are just strictly cartoonists, and that's all they do. And these are the kind of people, not the people who come to KRC, but there are cartoonists who say things like, if you do X more than Y, you are no longer Y, right? So there's sometimes there can be friction in swimming in different communities. And I think that's the fun thing to explore, right? So with that, did I frame it up at all so we can
Yeah.
go 10,000 feet up?
Yeah, let's go there.
All right. In the music, which means time to go 10,000 feet up. Look at the topic from every conceivable angle. Look for hidden dimensions, depths, and surprises. Talk about it conceptually, abstractly, before we talk about putting these thoughts into practice. So, okay, Rob, we mentioned this thing called Kids Read Comics a couple times. There's going to be somebody who doesn't know, right? Most people who listen to anything I've been doing for the past 7 years has probably at least heard of Kids Read Comics, or at least heard me say those words. But for the person who's like just tuning in for the first time, Kids Read Comics is what? It's a 3-day conference, convention, festival, all of those things, right?
Yeah, so you have like well, the first day is typically, so you've got a Friday experience, which that was added a few years in, right?
Yep.
And that's a pre-conference, which, I mean, it has more of an emphasis on sort of connecting two really interesting different communities, right? I mean, isn't there sort of an educators slash librarians combining with cartoonists, right?
Right. Yeah, I can actually pull it up while we talk about it. It started out, I think, like 3 years ago as a Sunday morning sort of meet and greet. So it's like there was just like bagels and coffee, and it was like cartoonists and librarians and educators get together in one room and let's just talk. Let's just have like a mixer kind of thing. That is what it was called originally. It was a cartoonist, librarian, educator mixer. But then Dave Carter of the University of Michigan and I sort of put our heads together and said, what else can we do with it? And so we came up with this idea of doing a pre-conference, Kids Read Comics in the classroom, a Friday morning, afternoon pre-conference where there's workshops and then there's panel discussions and talks all about following the topic of comics and education and trying to unite those three groups of people to help them come up with ideas on how they could better use comics in their environments and how they can work together to do that kind of thing. Does that sum it up?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's setting aside like a dedicated space for that, which is, I think it's very helpful because it sort of would need its own due time, right? I mean, it takes time to connect, and all of a sudden, through, I don't know, shared missions, shared inspiration, it's nice to set up like official events or like little learning experiences to build it into like just an incredible use of time. Where I think a mixer obviously was a productive thing, but then turning that into something like a more structured series of sessions, I think has amplified it quite a bit, because all of a sudden you get to put a spotlight on some really, really amazing work, and also deeper conversations that everyone gets to chip into from the side, but also just benefit from just soaking it in.
Yeah, and having talks by people like Carol Tilley, who she did a terrific talk that like sort of contextualized why we're doing this thing in the first place. Because she did like a history of comics, and then she wrote a paper on it, which you can find on our website, and we'll link to it in the show notes. But you can just do a search for Carol Tilley, Comics Crusader. There's actually a documentary, a film documentary made about her, and she talks about how in like the 1930s and 40s, like 600 titles were being produced in comics on a monthly basis, and 1 billion comics were sold a year, right?
And billion
put that
with a B.
Billion with a B. And you put that in perspective where we are now. It's like, wow, we're in this golden age. Well, we kind of are. But that's only because comics was almost destroyed in the 1950s. And now we're like building back up. But we're now nowhere near where we were, like where comics transcended all classes, all gender, all ethnicity. Like everybody just read comics in the 1930s and 40s, right? And so she's like sort of contextualized through the talk. She kind of made us all like kind of take a deep breath and go like, whoa, that's why we're doing this. That's why we're still advocating for this medium or this art form, right? Anyway, and then it concludes that Friday. Then we have like this. We'll talk more in detail about these things. But there was like a comics sort of mixer at the Vault of Midnight local comic shop where the Vault of Midnight set up this giant wall, this foam core wall on like this really great frame, so they could like swap out panels as we filled them. And they just gave us a big bucket of markers, and they said to all of us cartoonists and the public, "Have at it, do a giant jam comic." And we did. We filled that thing up. And we posted photos. We'll link to them online or on lianatart.com. So then you have like this big get together, this way to like, oh, and the draw wall faced Main Street in downtown Ann Arbor, so it was like this great like spectacle, but it was also a nice low risk way for the cartoonists to get to know one another, and for the public to like engage with these cartoonists. Um, and then the Saturday and Sunday event kicks off the next day. Now, what is the Saturday and Sunday event? Now, this is like it's a convention, but it's a convention that is designed to celebrate and honor comics for kids and the people who make comics for kids. Now, remember, historically, there haven't been many conventions that do that. And I'm not trying to say like, oh, look how special we are. I'm just saying that the reason I'm putting that emphasis there is because traditionally at conventions, maybe you'll have like a kids island, like at Heroes Con or at the Baltimore Comic Con. You got like a special section for kids. But there are very few conventions that are entirely for kids comics, right? So, yeah, so we got 50 artists who come out and they table like a traditional convention. But the angle that we have is a high level of interactivity. So all the participants, all the tabling artists are invited to lead hands-on workshops for kids all weekend long. And we had something over 50 drawing events, whether there were workshops or demos or things like that, over the course of 2 days. It's crazy. So, yeah, something like that.
Oh, I'm just checking to see if we are still connected.
Oh, was there latency?
Because there was there was a bit, and I think we're okay now.
It righted itself.
Yeah. Well, I mean, okay. Yeah, I mean, your obviously your description is quite accurate. It's okay. So you were cutting out a little bit there, but looking at the how the event on Saturday and Sunday, where you're as an artist you're doing both tabling and participating in events. That's sort of that's really an interesting thing that I notice in the like a lot of other events that it's not just the sort of it is primarily fully targeted at an all ages audience and especially kids, right? And I mean, it's in the title of the event, but not only that, you've got this whole different situation of how artists are invited to take part in learning experiences beyond just being at a table and maybe being engaging in general, or doing some demonstrations or giving feedback on drawings, the kind of common interactions that you'd expect as you walk through a tabling group of artists. Now, let's see, how did that come about into the event, the sort of teaching aspect?
You want the jokey answer? You want the real answer? Jokey answer being like, well, I'm completely self-absorbed, and that's what I was doing at the time. So it was like, oh, here's my hammer. Every problem's a nail. But
okay.
No, but it was Heresy. When I got involved with it, it was my chance to solve a lot of pain points for me as a cartoonist and as somebody who goes to comic conventions. I noticed that. I mean, there's a video that people can watch. It's a 2-minute video that like sort of summarizes kids read comics. So you hear me say a lot of this stuff, but it's like when you go to a comic convention, the interaction is there, but it's kind of one way. It's one way in the sense of I love your stuff. It really affected me. I'm very grateful. And then the other person says, "Wow, that's so great. Here's an autograph. Here you go." The communication kind of only happens one way. Right? The fan tells the author how much they enjoy. And there's no way the author has the bandwidth to properly address each person that is there signing a thing, right? Mm-hmm. I wanted to participate and help design something that would provide rich experiences, richer than getting my picture taken with somebody who I admire. Mm-hmm. I want to be able to sit down with the person whose work I admire and work alongside of them, right? So the example I always point out is that like it's like imagine when you're a kid. Now I'm imagining that we're all talking about people of a certain age, our age. Imagine when you're a kid and you just go to your library and there's Maurice Sendak there, there's Richard Scarry there, there's Judy Blume there, and you go up and like, oh my God, it's Richard Scarry. I love his books. And he says, hey, how'd you like to draw a thing with me, right? Imagine the impact that would have had on you as a child. Huge, right?
Oh yeah, amazing.
So that was the idea. The idea is like, boy, if I had my druthers, cartoonists came out to this show, they would all lead some kind of hands-on thing to share their knowledge with young people and inspire young people. Because, and then the other part of my equation, as I figured it, is if we get kids excited about making comics, even if they don't want to be a cartoonist, if we're just opening up the process a little bit to make it more accessible to them, they're going to have a positive experience with comics, which means they're going to love comics, which means there's more readers for comics, which means that all of us have a better chance of making a living at this comics jazz. It's a long game that I'm playing with that thing, but that's my logic. That's my reasoning behind it, right? Is that it's about getting them excited about the medium and not about celebrity, right?
Well, I mean, you said something really interesting that I'm guessing was an early on influence for that choice to say, well, in designing this event, we're going to make sure that we set aside space and also choose people that will fit that space in such a way where they will help create these in-depth experiences. Or I'm not sure, how did you phrase that?
Rich experience.
A rich experience.
Yeah.
Now, okay, so you start out setting some resources aside for that, right? Has that grown over time?
Yeah, certainly.
Because I remember listening to Art and Story in the earlier years of Kids Read Comics, and here's me just throwing this out there. I'm guessing there probably was a feedback loop, right? I mean, did you guys were able to, the organizers of the show, there was the whole, we put a thing out there and we performed it, but we heard back from the audience. And I mean, what kind of things did you hear back?
Oh yeah, so early on, I wanted to dive in and just basically appropriate classes for the event. So like year one, it's like, let's do a series of classes. So it's kind of like going to a summer camp all day long. What I didn't count on was, what I wasn't servicing in the initial design was a large enough track of low-risk activities. We had some. Like the quick draws had been with Kids Read Comics since year one, but we only had a couple. And when we had them, I'll be the first to admit, I put them in grudgingly. I was like, I guess we can have a drawing demo. Not very rich, not rich interactivity for me. I want kids drawing. Like I had my agenda. I wanted kids to draw with authors. That was my vision. That's what I was sticking to, But then Dan Mishkin very astutely, Dan Mishkin, one of the smartest, wisest people in comics, let's face it. Speaker of many quotable lines. But, he was the one who said, like, we really need something where it's like a drawing demo. And I grudgingly, put it in the programming schedule. But then that feedback loop was, oh, wait, you put up a drawing demo, that gets a crowd. That gets the people who are curious but nervous to engage with it. And maybe some of them get, Tom Sawyered into actually participating in a workshop. And then I saw its value. I see the value of, and the show has grown into 3 programming tracks as a result of that. So yes, there was a feedback loop to say, like, we need super low risk, fun, game-like activities, right? Now we've got things like the Comics Quickfire and the Iron Cartoonist, which you saw, like those kind of things are very gameful. And then you've got workshops where it's like, we're going to draw together, we're going to make a mini comic together. And then you've got even more in-depth, like teen level stuff, where it's like you were doing your game prototyping workshop, Brandon Dayton was doing his dynamic line work workshop, we had a couple storyboarding workshops, right? And demos. We had panel discussions on navigating a career in comics with SpongeBob Comics editor Chris Duffy. So yeah, there's like 3 distinct tracks now that were originally just one track, right? That was based on user interaction and feedback. And this year, guess what? I'm going through the process right now of evaluating how everything went and making adjustments based on the way people interacted with the stuff. So it's going to change next year too.
So that feedback loop, like, do you have, so I'm involved a lot with sort of testing small ideas. You get systems out there, you put them into the world, you be brave and try to not over perfection, worship the perfection, like ultimate version of it, but you do something, and then you notice what happens and you iterate. I can say that it, like, clearly, like, probably putting on a workshop like what I do, which is super high risk. I mean, I do everything I can to Tom Sawyer people, but I am asking people to basically work their tail off for an hour.
Hour and a half.
Hour and a half if I have the time, right? And I'm like, and you're going to work, but it's going to be awesome. It's going to be worth it.
Yeah.
No way could that happen if like there wasn't this sort of trust already built up, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And so I can really clearly see the effect of that sort of build up. But I mean, there's just sort of these you can tell that that evolution has happened and that sort of iteration has happened. I'm just wondering, was there any sort of aha, like someone reacted to a thing and then it was like, oh, wait a minute, that's Descent, that's the next.
Oh, well, actually, it wasn't at Kids Read Comics where that aha was for me. And
cool.
you were there for this aha. And that was at the Up Fair in 2010, I think, is when that was.
Yes.
And that's where the first draw wall experience I ever had happened. And the Up Fair organizers and I worked together, and I think it was Sarah and Brian Turner got like this access to this house that was not in use. And they just like whitewashed the walls. And like we were told, here's some markers, have at it. And I was going to look up the Up Fair website, but I don't think it's around anymore. And we can talk more about this in a minute, but Up Fair was like sort of like intended to be like a conference for visual artists, right?
Right. Yeah. Like a professional development experience.
Right. And when I watched these cartoonists, when they were all just like, there was music playing, and it was literally like a junior high mixer. Everybody was just lining the walls, and they're all in their little clusters. And then the moment somebody brought that bucket of markers out, and I watched somebody walk up to that wall and throw down those first couple lines, and then like two more people go up, then two more, and then about 45 minutes later, everybody in the room was drawing all over these walls, and they were talking to each other, and I was watching friendships begin. Right? I've been told by people that who attended this event that they're still friends with the people they made with at the event. That was the moment when I realized I had a visual representation of what my philosophy in the arts is. That there are no superstars here. We're all in the same playing field. And what's more interesting to me is the interactions that happen when we all commit to a big thing rather than who's fighting for the comics papacy and who gets to be crowned Johnny Too Cool, right? Like that was seeing a visual representation of something that you feel really strongly about but don't have the words for. That was the big aha moment. And so then I brought that back to Kids Read Comics, saying like, we need more events like that where we're putting a lot of people, like the draw wall, like when Dave Roman brought the Comics Quick Fire to the show, like the Kids Comics Revolution Awards, where everybody is kind of being honored in some way or another. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's like you're just describing like it's almost like discovering the like key, like when you are designing a game or you are designing a positive user experience. It's just tuning in to those signals that like, oh, we believe in this thing and we see how this representation of it is connecting with people and okay, so now we're going to weave in that connection and then other connections and eventually where it's like, oh, there's the safe route in and there's these sort of super informal events. Then there's the little more formal events where you got to be in a place but you see a game show, and then the next, and all those things just kind of weave together and reinforce Tom Sawyer and people into like, well, this is super safe, super fun, and you can try it here, and this is really set up for you to do that, and you're likely going to go away only with positive things. Like you're going to have good conversation. You might come away with fun drawings, and of course you have the chance to go doing a very, very safe thing, which is go buy cool stuff, right?
Right.
People are familiar with buying stuff. But that is an interesting experience. You don't forget the sort of tabling and expo aspect too.
Right.
People are quite familiar with it and pretty good at it.
And it's a simple interaction to understand, right? Mm-hmm. There's not much to wrap your brain around there. I have a thing. You look at it, determine if it has value. You give me money for the thing, right?
Yeah.
But yeah. So I mean, a lot of KRC's design hasn't altered a whole lot. There are certain things, like in some years we did more stuff outdoors. Like, you remember the year where we actually had, like, the artist alley was outdoors.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, back in Chelsea, and that presented a whole new design problem in terms of, like, how do we get the crowd to navigate through these various different locations, right? And there were some things that were successful and some things that weren't as successful. And then also, like, it brings in a whole nother realm of friction in terms of, like, what happens if it rains? Do we have a rain backup? Like a rain location, right?
Right.
So yeah.
But of course, then it also makes it very summer festy and whatnot too. So
Right.
it's taken on lots of experiments and a variety of mutations, right?
Right. But like the general core of, like, interactivity with cartoonists and kids has remained pretty consistent throughout the whole thing. I mean, that's like the core ethos of the thing. And the expressions of that have changed, like, to varying degrees. Like, one of the things that I was trying this year with the programming was introducing more stuff for little kids and more stuff for teens, right? Like, introducing those two age groups, like more programming for those two age groups, because I feel like we've got, like, ages 8 through 12 pretty well serviced with the stuff we do at KRC. And then, some of the conversations you and I had after the show were like, okay, what else could we do for adults? What could we do for working cartoonists, right? And there's some ideas that we're kicking around, but we don't have to go into that. But yes, with each one.
And inherently, if I have someone's ear, and I will typically share some kind of observations or food for thought.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Which is great. I mean, like, because I just had, like, so much observational feedback from you. Because, I mean, this is where maybe we should go into, like, some of the differences between attending the show and putting on the show. Is that, like, and I've said this a million times before, is like, when Ann and me and Dan Michigan and Dan Merritt and Katie Merritt and all the staff at AADL are putting on the show, it's like we don't have time to really observe carefully what's happening on the floor. It's more like we're responding to what's happening on the floor, but we don't get to stand there and, like, look at it. You know what I mean? The moon landing thing. You're just trying to make sure that the astronauts don't die. You don't get to sit there and go, like, wow, I'm watching somebody walk on the moon. So,
yeah, I mean, there's definitely some advantage where, without having that pressure, and yeah, it's a lot easier to sit back and gather some notes. Boy, did I take a lot of notes.
You were so generous with that too. I mean, I just got to take my hat off to you, because you didn't have to do it. You could have just been sitting back and then just enjoying the show passively, and instead, Rob has always got his Columbo face on, and it's
And starting in the airport, here I am behind Jersey. Time to write notes.
It's true.
Oh boy.
But yeah, there was a lot of really great feedback from you on how the show actually felt from your perspective. But can we touch on something that you said, or that you kind of said at the show, that I thought was super interesting, because when you pointed it out, it made me realize that when I went to IO, I was feeling like a friction about this, and I hinted at it when I was at the unconference at the beginning of IO. I remember walking in, going like, "What do I have to offer these people?" I can respond to things if people ask me a question, but I can't. I'm certainly not qualified to go up to this board and write down topics for everybody else to talk about, because this is a coders thing, And sure enough, I mean, like, I actually just went out to lunch with a guy who I met at IO the other day.
Funny.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
That's like what a positive experience this was. Is that, like, you meet people, and, like, when they find out that they were in town, they're like, hey, look this up, and, like, okay, cool, we'll hang out with you. But, like, yeah, like, what I realized is that I was feeling a friction about, they're gonna know that I'm not one of them, and when they find out I'm not one of them, there's gonna be this whole, you're an other. I don't know how to engage with you, right? And we've all experienced that, right?
Oh yeah.
We've all been in that situation where somebody's like, "Oh, you're not what I am," and it's not a judgment call. It's not like, "Oh, you stink because you're not what I am," but it is sort of acknowledged that we have a barrier to overcome if we're going to interact in any kind of extended period, right? But the path of least resistance is to not really interact much at all because you're another, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. And so, like, I'm really curious, like, what sort of
Where I'm going with this?
yeah.
Okay. So where I'm going with this is that both IO and Kids Read Comics were places where, and I've been to a number of comic conventions where that other thing kind of gets tried out in front of me. Oh, who publishes you? Oh, actually, this book, the front, is self-published. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh,
Other,
yeah.
right? Oh, what kind of books do you do? Oh, I mostly focus on kids comics. Oh, other, we've any circle, you can find that otherness there, right? But
True,
at
true.
IO and at KRC, that friction isn't really present,
Mm-mm.
because I watched you get introduced to a whole bunch of people at KRC and yeah, I'm a coder, designer, make games, and I do comics too. And nobody did the whole, oh, not published, Nobody did. And as a matter of fact, I was watching, I had to interrupt you at one point to, hand you a drink because you were so engrossed in conversation with a comic book editor, And I don't know what you guys were talking about. But you guys were just, embroiled for, the longest time.
Yeah. Oh, it was a lot of fun. I mean, there's something very energizing about learning from so many different perspectives and things where if someone does really carry with them a primarily or most often a different creative tool set or a little bit different and to hear them and how they've engaged in service and what they do with it, the kind of things they make, how they make it, why they make it, all that stuff. It's fun. It's really fascinating to me. And I like to experiment with where the some of the otherness things and the things I like to advocate for, I'm like, how does it fit in over here? Does it fit? I don't know. And it's fun to hear reactions and feedback as well. So occasionally systemic design, systemic thinking, and I'll point out if you have published a comic, there's a good chance that you've come up with a system to just get your pages out. Or there's a chance where you have created some kind of sustainable approach, and then just talking like that, some artists are like, wow, you're what are these words? And that's okay. I mean, that's all right. I've been around that, and I do feel like another in that circumstance. That hasn't happened here. Yeah.
Any visual artist listening who did say wow, rewind 30 seconds, listen to that again, because Rob just modeled the thinking activity that goes on when you're figuring out how to get involved in a conversation with somebody. Okay, I originally wanted to start out from external observation point about why we think we didn't run into that other thing. Okay. But I want to jump to the other side that I had an interior and exterior approach to this topic. Was interior, when you're amongst a bunch of people who are not what you are, and you don't have that common reference point. I can't say to you, Rob, hey, remember that issue of Green Lantern where the kid goes in outer space and explodes? I can't use that as a touch point.
That sounds sad, and I just laughed at it.
It's actually pretty ridiculous.
Okay.
And scientifically inaccurate. But that's the kind of thing where, with certain friends in the comics industry, I can say, hey, remember that? Remember the second Ambush Bug miniseries, Son of Ambush Bug, where Cheeks the Toy Wonder becomes a doll cannibal? And, we can have that cultural touch point to, begin the conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't necessarily have that, right?
No.
You're coming at it from a different standpoint. So I'm wondering if you could characterize or walk through or model this kind of mapping your way to finding out the value that you have to provide a group when you're at a conference, right? Because I'm also going to submit that even though I just made this situation where it's Rob, you were the other in the situation in a way because you don't have all this profound knowledge of DC Comics history, but everybody feels like they're the other, right? Everybody feels
totally.
Yeah. So how did Rob Stenzinger go from the guy who is being introduced as Jersey's pal to suddenly this butterfly that's just floating around all these different campfires and just chat. So to where at the cool down after the show, I don't think I got to talk to you until we went home.
Yeah. And it was and right, it was awesome. And it was also like I classify myself as an ambivert, but like in order to go back and forth between those modes, I do enjoy a little bit of downtime, a little bit of quiet. I mean, having kids has also helped me prepare to never have that time, but or almost never till everyone's asleep. So yeah, but the problem is when you stay up a long time chatting with fascinating people, then there is none of that, no downtime. So that was kind of intense, right? And yet so worthwhile. And it's like I wouldn't try to avoid any of it, right? It was really fun. So as far as how I go about it, or why, or both.
Well, I think the how will reveal the why.
Okay. The how is, well, really isn't complicated. It's really listening, and eventually, when you soak in enough of what someone else is sharing, especially when it fires them up, there are you will inherently have questions. So those questions help. They help sort of prove that you have been listening and that you care in some way. And it's obviously if your question is sort of a well, if you're just feeling antsy or you're uncomfortable, I think it's worth just trying to sit through that and not worry about it, because that's not really, I wouldn't call that worthy criteria to go ahead and interrupt and blurt out a question, because chances are just you will get that thing where you're like, oh my gosh, wait a minute, the thing you said, and the thing you said and the other thing you said, are those all because of whatever, right? So and so then you get to ask something that helps you connect more with that other person. Chances are the worst thing that's going to happen is you will learn about that other person. And that I don't see the downside in that.
Right.
But so oh my gosh, there's so many over years or time, I will have greater developed theory about this. It may be total baloney or whatever, but like there are some folks that like in that I was connecting with at KRC, that we would talk mostly about process. Other folks really had incredible story analysis and story archival memory.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Are you talking about Lunch with Me and Zach?
Okay. Yeah, exactly. That's an interesting name of a show. Lunch with Jersey and Zach. Or
I think we went through like 20 books that we were like, oh, Rob, you got to read this one too, because this scene and this scene and this scene. And when did you read that book? Oh, 1986. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So there's a but it was more than that. It wasn't just like, oh, remember this? That was cool. Remember that? That was cool.
Right.
Remember this? No, I hated it. Remember this? Then it was this again like analytical exploration approach and connection that always had some relevance to start that exploration to the current, like, oh, a thing came up or a joke was said, and then they're like, that's like this joke, and all of a sudden, time to fly on along the reading rainbow, and
but okay, it's funny that you bring up this whole like listening and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you're talking about patience. A lot of this is like I'm hearing the word patience over and over again as you're describing like listening to somebody.
Well, I don't mean it in that way. I would say more curiosity, or maybe it would be practice to if it would. I would say patience would come to bear if you're holding back for something.
Right. Well, patience in the sense that like when we're engaging with other people in a field, in this kind of environment, there can be this pressure to be interesting, right?
Well, or pressure to be, of any sort, where just the social pressure to be interesting, but also the professional pressure to be networking.
Yeah. I got to find the spot in this conversation to mention this book that I work on so that I make books. right?
Yeah.
That kind of thing, or a variety of things. But anytime you feel like that pressure building up of like, I gotta say something, or even if you find yourself just doing like, while they're talking, like, yes, I'm listening. Look, I'm listening. Ann and I were just talking tonight about this, about like how you, Rob, have this magnificent sort of lean back, tilt of the head, and you do this thing with your hands, like, and it's like it's the Rob Stenzinger wind up. It's like I've been listening for a long time to everything you said. Here's the wind up. I'm going to say something really, really interesting right now. You know,
That's no pressure now.
we can't see your hands, so nobody can see the wind up. But like I saw you doing that a lot at KRC. Like you'll sit there and you're drinking it in. You're drinking in the person, and then all of a sudden, here's what I got. Here's what I've processed based on everything you've told me.
And I think, I mean, everyone's wired differently, right?
Sure.
That is something that works out well for me because so when you pursue like a path of sort of user experience design, much like when you're researching reference material, when you're going to draw a comic for a place that you haven't been, or there's a particular thing that you need to get very precise due to it's an important prop or element, whatever, and you need to go look up reference. That's a skill you build. Like you practice looking up reference, you practice utilizing the reference. And for me, in user experience, it's a huge discipline that I lean upon, which is just research and the let's see, surveys, user testing, all that kind of stuff. So no, I wasn't putting something in front of someone and then asking them to perform tasks. But like when you do that a lot, you inherently have this inquisitive approach. And also, like, I mean, gosh, there's this whole thing. Like if you look at check out, we should link to this, and it's super tangentially related. I'm not trying to just throw it in here, but like this thing that we're kind of talking about is covered in sort of like the empathy gathering phase of human-centric design. So there's a great free booklet on this at IDEO, right? IDEO is a design firm. That IDEO.
Yo.
Yeah, very influential in sort of collaborative design and skills like design thinking and all that stuff. And yeah, so whatever. So when you practice, anyone listening who is of the user experience set of disciplines will be like, yeah, totally, yep, we know what you're doing. Before I hung a lampshade on it. So, but everyone else, if you're like curious to dive in more into that approach, it feels so natural. It's not like something I'm forcing. I really enjoy doing that. So I feel well suited when I'm doing that kind of exploration. And so right. Anyway, that's plenty of unboxing on that.
Well, okay. So we've covered sort of like the internal thing that's going through your head, and
the habit and this.
In the habit, and yeah, and like it's so funny. It's one of those things where it can easily get turned into a platitude, where it's like, you know what, being having an unselfish desire to do good actually makes you feel good. It sounds dumb, and it sounds so like something like your pastor or your parents tell you, but it's actually like pretty true because you get like a huge benefit from it. But
well,
like
that's a thing with KRC though. There's a lot of advocacy flowing through there.
Okay, we're getting to the external aspect of this, so let's go there. Okay,
yeah.
What do you mean?
Well, you choosing to go there as a sort of like a tabling artist, a participant, a facilitator of a workshop, or some sort of performer during a drawing experience, what have you. Your chances are you're doing that not just for the like immediate external reward. You know, maybe there's a little bit of that because you got some performer in you. You might be funny. You might, like to, make people laugh with a doodle or whatever. That's cool. But like, there's also, you may be good at, you may sell books, whatever, right? So there's external reasons, right? But
Sure.
The internal reasons, there's this powerful flow of advocacy through that event because of the idea, like you mentioned, Jersey. Well, it's part of its purpose is to provide. I'm totally blanking again. What formative experiences.
Rich experiences.
Rich experiences. It's
Think,
so
think,
simple.
think of
Rich
butter.
experience.
Think of like cooking with butter. It's rich. There's a lot of
Yes.
calories in there, and maybe you're gonna feel a little bloated, but it's gonna be satisfying. It's like eating a big pile of grilled cheese sandwiches and watching Lord of the Rings.
Man, that does sound like a vacation. So let's see the advocacy thing. So why other people are doing this and why you are doing this is probably to help others see the creativity, the excitement, the possibility in the medium of comics, and
You're suggesting
the
that
benefits of being a comic reader, and how being a comic reader is just being a reader and all that.
So is this all to say that part of it is baked into the mission statement? Like the interactions are kind of like in part being fed by the mission statement that drew the people there.
And inherently there's a feedback loop there, because the people there embody that mission, and the people there embodying that mission see each other embodying that mission, and there's a whole lot of like, wow, I'm a part of something bigger than just me. I'm not alone at my art desk. I'm
But,
a part of this.
That's the thing that
important
surprises me, though, because that doesn't appeal to everybody, right? I mean, granted, KRC, let's put it in perspective, very small show, 50 artists. Compare that to a lot of shows, a lot more artists at other shows. So it is a very small, intimate show, which is an advantage in its own way, but we can get into that if we have time. But it's the fact that, I don't feel like I can walk down the street and say, like, hey, stranger, do you want to help kids today? That's not like an immediately appealing thing. Granted, okay, that's a weird situation because like I'm approaching somebody who doesn't know who I am. But I mean, like, people go into a career in publishing to make a living. The idea of donating their weekend for this abstract of getting more kids to love comics. That it surprises me how many people we get, is what I'm saying. It surprises me that we haven't run into more friction points where somebody shows up going like, hey, where's all my money? How come I'm not making $1 million off this show? Why do these kids want to talk to me? I'm surprised that we don't run into that more often, I guess, is what I'm saying.
I would say that, like maybe you did on the first year or what have you, but there's likely a building effect that helps. It becomes pretty self-evident where people would, just as there are likely shows that you would choose not to go to, and same with me, where I'm like, well, I'm pretty sure we're not on the same page, so we don't need to go there. That's likely happening where it is self-evident that there's a lot of there is that sort of advocacy, but like when you're even curious and starting to explore that, it's there is a very tangible thing that you can then be better informed. Like, do I want to put more into this, right? Like, or maybe I was a part of this and I did like one of the sort of activities I didn't have to plan that much for because I don't know, what do I have to teach, that kind of stuff.
Right.
And but inherently you're going to be observing much of the higher investment and high return, high investment, high reward kind of stuff, like the workshops, like the Iron Cartoonist was amazing.
Can we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, like there must have been so much work that went into planning that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's see. So setting up, what is Iron Cartoonist? If anyone has seen Iron Chef, right? You've got the beginning of sort of a mashup of concepts. There's like doodling in front of an audience type shows, like what, the Win, Lose or Draw, that kind of stuff.
I remember that.
Mixed with like American Idol, I think.
Yeah.
And cartoonists. And that's the basic part of the formula, but it's executed magically by its creator and facilitator, Zach Giolongo.
He's so good. So good. So yes, you have 3 cartoonists with flip charts and like drawing pads in front of an audience. Then you have Zach, who's acting as host. He has a co-host. There's 2 hosts, Zach and the co-host. And then it was just Zach on his own, wasn't it?
Just
because
Zach,
then he has,
yeah.
Then he has 3 judges. So he has 3 cartoonists who are a judges panel, and then Zach has these cards of ingredients, right? And so it's like you have to mix these 2 things together. So it'll be like, oh, it's the Hulk on summer vacation with you know, I don't know, name a thing, you know, like Ram Man from He-Man. You got to mix those 2 things together, and a werewolf, you know, and then like they get like a minute or something, and there's music playing while they're drawing. Zach does color commentary while they're drawing, and then they finish, and then the judges go over the pieces, and then also there's all this like fun irreverence with the judges. Like it's sort of like it's Iron Cartoonist, but they know they're Iron Cartoonist, right? So like if Iron Chef was self-aware, it's like, yeah, we know this is ridiculous, we're just gonna have fun with it. That's what this is. Because I remember like Tori Wolcott was one of the judges, and her husband Keen Sue was one of the contestants. She's like, I'm looking at Keen's piece and it looks really good, but you know what? You didn't do a good job in the dishes last night, so I'm gonna have to give you -3 points on that. You know?
That's right. It's so silly. But okay, so now stepping back, so here's this really funny show. There's an audience. You're watching it. There's some participation. There's countdown music. There's music playing while the drawings are happening, and it's kind of thematically related and super funny, right? Like a little bit of surfer rock when there was oh gosh, what was the theme? It was combining Johnny Depp and who? Oh gosh, I cannot remember the pop artist.
Oh, Warhol?
Wasn't Taylor Swift. It was
a pop. I thought you meant like I thought you meant pop art, not pop music. That's great.
Exactly. It
was Katy Perry or something.
Katy
like
Perry. There you go. So right, and it was like whatever, you know, beach, space beach apocalypse, you know, 90 million or whatever it was, right? 70,000. Anyway, yeah, and they're playing surf rock in the back, or he was playing that, and the audience counting down. So there's all this participation. There's this energy to this, right? And there is clearly some fun, some storytelling, some improvisation, lots of good times mixed with visual art, illustration, and plus like creative challenge in there too. So there's like this performance where the artists don't know what they're going to face when things start out. They don't have a script ahead of time. So you're seeing like there's a lot of good like energy in this event. And
I got a picture of Iron Cartoonist right here. Okay,
oh, yeah, cool.
I can pull it up while you talk about it.
And so putting yourself back in the shoes of like someone who is sort of new to this and exploring that, there's Zach and his headband and blazer. This is there's a lot of demonstration of like, boy, this looks like a lot of fun. Very much a Tom Sawyering kind of thing. If you were a tabling artist and you're seeing this kind of event, I mean, there's a million things you could do to react. You could say, whoa, that's way more than I have, you know, the energy to put together. But chances are you're going to be like, how do I do something? Because, you know, this looks great. I want to either, you know, help out Zach or do my own thing. Like maybe there's honestly, it was after watching. So Dave Roman has kind of a similar game show format.
Comics Quickfire, yeah.
Comics Quickfire. So it was after seeing his Comics Quickfire 2 years ago, where 1 year ago I did a workshop called Sketching the Happiest Kitty in the Universe.
Yeah, that's right. You did that last year at KRC.
Not really a game show, right? But it was taking some of that sort of some of that improvisation going on in that sort of gameful context and turning it into a simpler workshop, right? So you could see something that's been honed and performed a bunch of times and well executed and what have you. But that doesn't mean you're on the hook to do exactly that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, I thought Comics Quickfire was quite entertaining when I saw it at KRC about 3 years ago, I think. And I thought, well, let's. What could I do? And well, there you go. I came up with a series of drawing prompts and sort of some templates that led us to play around with sketching the happiest kitty. And oh my gosh, someone actually stopped by my table. There's a young man that took the template from sketching the happiest kitty, right? And he photocopied a whole bunch of them, and he turned them all into sort of a kitty-fied popular character, right? And so that was just a wild, delightful feedback loop from having done this last year. This year I did not do that workshop, yet having done that a year ago, someone stops by my table with something from it. That was super cool.
Wait. They showed up a year later.
Yeah, year later. Yes.
That's so cool.
So, right. And that was an event that, again, was nowhere near as complicated or as, like, you know, as big of a challenge to sort of say, what am I going to do over this? What's the experience I'm facilitating or creating over this hour or whatever? Again, like sketching the happiest kitty was really pretty simple, but still silly and fun. Anyway, yeah. You don't have to put that kind of pressure on yourself. You can start simple.
So what I'm hearing here, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that it's like one of the questions I had. We kind of talked about this during the weekend, but I wanted to bring it to the show. One of the questions I had was like, what is it that is like we experience the culture? And I think the words I said when we were driving around was like, this weekend was one of those ones where we're going to remember this for a long time. And this is going to be one of those things where, like, years from now, we're going to say, remember KRC 2015. Oh, my God, those were golden times, right? At least I'm going to say that.
No, I agree, man.
And
it was amazing.
So then the next question for me is like, okay, well, what's happening here to permit this culture to exist? What's reinforcing this culture? What features, what elements, what pieces, and I think that you've just highlighted a bunch of them, is the initial mission statement, which attracts a certain kind of person, those certain kinds of people getting together and having a genuine curiosity towards one another, and then also this sense of let's help young people, right? And let's help young people in a variety of ways. There's not just one way to do it. We don't just have to do the classroom experience. We can have games. We can have demos. We can do things that appeal to our best instincts to help us make memorable and rich experiences for people that makes them come back to you upwards of a year later. I had a family come up to me who came all the way from Kentucky, which, it's not like they came from Australia, but Kentucky is like 6 hours or more away from Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Yeah.
It's a long way to go for a convention.
Yes.
And they said that they've been coming for like 4 years. Their kid, who's now like in his teens, is like he's growing up with the show, and they were expressing gratitude that like we were because I think it was during one of Brandon's workshop. Brandon Dayton was doing a digital inking demo kind of thing, and they were expressing gratitude that here's this the programming is growing up with the kid, right? That teen track didn't exist when he was younger. Now that he's getting into his teen years, here's this now. But yeah, like that kind of, you provide a rich experience and then you get people who get kind of hooked on it, right? Not in the bad way, in the good way.
Yeah, well, and that for everyone. So there is there's very much a strong positive feedback loop. And that feeds in on itself. Especially when you're there to be like, I want to help. Oh, and I'm curious there, and stuff happens because you're going to see some pretty great stuff. That performances, teaching, and otherwise.
I feel like we're kind of close to being having walked around the 10,000 feet up section. But I got a question for you, Rob. Big broad one, huge broad question. No, I'm not looking for any kind of specific answer. Just chew on this for a little bit.
Okay.
What's next? Got back from KRC, you got back from IO. We talked in the IO episode about different things that you want to do, having gone through this gauntlet of inspiration at IO. You just went through another smaller dose of that intense inspiration, being around really intelligent, enthusiastic people. What's next for Rob Stenzinger? What are you going to do with this experience?
I would not call it a small dose.
It was like 4 days.
It was also very intense in a very positive kind of way. And yeah, well, I mean, the short answer is it's so easy to talk about whatever. I don't know, like publicly proclaiming, I'm going to make all the things or whatever. But boy, do I want to make comics. Like, you, whoa, man. I mean, um, I was working on a story that I put on pause in order to finish a game before our kids read comics.
Oh, what game would that be, Rob? What game are you referring to by any chance for those who are just tuning to the show for the first time?
Well, the game I finished recently is called This Panda Needs You, and you can check it out at this-panda.com. And I believe Jersey has it up on the screen. Yeah, so that's we talked quite a bit about that a couple episodes ago.
Right, we'll link to it in the show notes. But just,
Yeah.
I mean, the short version is it's an iOS game that for little ones.
Yeah, and exactly. It's targeted primarily at little ones, but honestly, there was kids, age I would say up to 10 or 11, playing it when I was tabling.
Oh,
Because,
really?
yeah. Oh, I had to sort of gauge if it felt right to have the iPad out, because it's one of those things where those cute little pandas jumping up and down on the screen. And I'm like, haha, I'm this is hopefully the non-evil user experience going on, but I'm like, I have something that's playing with your peripheral vision. Guess what? You're going to look at my table, and you probably can't help it. So, there's this cute little panda jumping up and down, and turns out people are very fluent with iPads. And especially kids. So there was a lot of, can I touch that? Can I play with it? And I would just sort of lay it down. I'm like, here you go. You can touch that on the table. Go for it. And kids would play it. And some kids would play it and play it and play it and play it. And then come back and ask to play it. But where I was like, well, I want to be a good table, citizen. And I want to make sure, because it wasn't like cranking out like, this panda needs you this Saturday. Stop by this table. Big crazy music and like lights and special effects blinding people so they just can't help but fall into it. It was just this quiet little iPad with a cute panda that takes up maybe 5% of the screen, right?
And it was an iPad mini. It was not a huge amount of real estate that you were
No.
chewing up with the iPad. I think it was very tasteful, Rob. I wouldn't worry too much about it. But I appreciate you being that concerned.
But I did was I looked around. I'm like, I'm being in an other. Watch this animated thing on the table. Anyway, I was sensitive to that, and
I do think you need to do a YouTube trailer now, like the more intense monster truck version of This Panda Needs You this Saturday.
Yeah. I don't know. That's funny. I suppose, I could put a secret monster truck level, stacking the trucks. And because, that's all it is. It's a little block stacking game. And honestly, I don't know. I'm not tired of stacking blocks, and I'm way older than 5, right? So it turns a lot of people played around with it, even some parents. So there was that, and that's when I finished. But I jumped into that by way of saying I was working on a comic before then, and I got to the sort of this where I was about to do the loose pencil stage. I finished the thumbnails. I finished script, all that kind of stuff, the basic word balloon layouts and whatnot. But yeah, I put it on pause to finish that game, and then going to this event and being so seeped in and believing honestly with everything I am that comics are an amazing medium, and makes me want to do more. Just good news, bad news. Want to do more.
Speaking selfishly, that's like the best thing in the world for me to hear. Like that's like the best review you can give me as somebody who tables at KRC is that when you get home, you really, really want to make comics. Makes me so incredibly happy.
Like really, really, really. So we'll see what happens.
I was looking for pictures of the Ghost Brawlers. I think, are these they?
Yeah, they're ways back. Yeah, there they are. Yep.
Okay, Ghost
I
Brawlers
see.
concept. Yep. So this was the comic you were working on before you'd put all of your cards on this Panda. But now that this Panda's done, and you're in maintenance mode on that, now you can put some energy into other projects. Yeah.
I will find a way. I will find a way to make something happen. No promises. As far as exactly what, because Ghost Brawlers is a thing. It's growing and evolving, but yeah, there's likely a mini in that'll be something I do. Soonish maybe. Totally don't want to commit.
Well, okay,
So,
but
anyway,
this actually
yes, it
goes
was
back
very
to
inspiring.
this goes back to this Panda episode where we talked about sitting on something for a long time, right? Like you
Yeah.
didn't want to make any promises with this Panda, right? So like wasn't until you were like almost ready to ship, like you were like 2 inches away from shipping, they were like, "Hey, I'm doing a game." Well, you mentioned that you were doing a
Hey,
game.
I'm doing a game. Hey, I shipped a game.
Yeah.
Pretty much. And yeah, it's funny. I'm exploring that too. That's a whole other habit too, where we talked about that in the latter part of the episode where we explored this Panda and sort of that whole process in holding back and then finally sharing it. And is it worth keeping something a secret for that long? And yeah, totally strong arguments I feel on both sides of that. So, all right.
Well, as for what's next for me, I'm in. Well, I and the KRC gang are in evaluation mode, right? It's like, okay, time to collect some numbers on, what happened where, get some anecdotes about interactions, get some feedback from people who participated in the event, so that we can start to figure out, okay, well, this is what the show's going to start to look like next year, and one of the nuts that I'd like to try to crack in the years to come is what we did at the Up Fair, some kind of conferencey kind of material for a working cartoonist, professional development track. That would be a really neat thing to try to solve. Because we talked about like mission statement being like a self-selecting mechanism to get the right kind of people to come to the show. How much more value can we create for them to be there, right? So it's like, okay, well, you're already the kind of person who likes to share your experiences to get kids excited, or maybe you like to perform. What if on top of all this stuff, you get a free table, you get lunch and everything? What if on top of all this, you also get a free class to level up your own skills, right? Because all of us are at different skill levels in different areas, right? So like, what if there could be like a CSS class for cartoonists, like, right? Or like an in-depth inking class where it's like, hey, you get to actually have some hands-on experience with a crow quill, and learn from somebody who knows how to use a crow quill, right? Level up your inking game, something like that. The trick there is like, I think it'd be like shopping while hungry, like going grocery shopping while I'm hungry, because I would just want to do everything. Let's do 3 weeks of classes.
That would be pretty amazing. But then, yeah. That's kind of like, that would be like South by Southwest. Kids read comics.
Yeah. Yeah, it really would. Hey, we actually know a lot of musicians now. Rob, you can play music. Got the Omatics, they could come out. Got the Shake Ups in Ponyville, who played at KRC.
That is funny. That's right. Well, right, yeah.
Too many interesting things to do. That's the problem. Did we walk around it, Rob?
Oh,
Did we
yeah.
on the ground?
Definitely.
Okay. Well then, this isn't really on the ground music. This is more 10,000 feet up music, but I'm going to use it to go on the ground because when you encounter a weekend like Kids Read Comics Weekend and like the IO Festival, you just feel that good. That even going to ground feels uplifting. So on the ground, where we actually talk about putting these thoughts into practice. What do we think about? What are we going to put into practice, Rob?
Well, let's see. So putting into practice is, we just talked about this event that I will not hesitate in saying it's an amazing event, and I am honored to be part of it in some small way. And I would definitely, attempt to be part of it again, right? But then if you're not in that situation, you're curious about, well, what do I do to be part of it? Or what if there's something like this near me or whatnot? I think there's some interesting things to explore as far as in getting into that sort of position.
Oh, so how do you get to be involved in the show? Is that what you're saying?
How do you? Well, yeah. I mean, how do you get to be involved? How do you ask yourself if you want to be involved in this kind of thing? Is
Yeah.
interesting.
So this is the thing. Like, so anybody who's listening and they're like, "Oh, this sounds like a neat thing. I'd like to be a part of it." Um, one of a part of our earlier discussion was evaluating whether, like, looking at the show and evaluating whether or not, you know, you it has any value to offer you, and if you have any value to offer it, right? And now I know I said earlier on, like when I went to IO, I was like, I don't know what value I have to offer this, but I knew it had value to offer me in terms of Rob has spoken so highly about it, and I think your exact words were, it's like 50 workshops at once. Like is what I think you said to me when I said like, yeah, I'm thinking about going to IO. Um, and I'm interested in design. Design figures in a lot of my work. So anyway, and I've done a little bit of coding on my own. But mistakes I've made in the past in terms of deciding what conventions to go to is I've gone to conventions based on numbers alone. Like, okay, I'm going to go to this con. It's a big superhero comic convention, but 50,000 people go to it. Well, just play the law of averages. If 50,000 people are there, that means if only 2% of them like to look for stuff like mine, then I have that much, that many people are going to look at my stuff. Anyway,
It's not. I mean, that isn't like a totally flawed way to look at it. I mean, that might work for your business.
it might, but that was disregarding the fact that there was a culture there that I didn't necessarily jive with, right? And it's not like I hated it. It's more like I'm at the table with my kids' comics. The kids looking at my comics. The kids are finding it. They like it. But then the parents are like, no, look, there's Superman over here. I recognize that. I don't recognize this, right?
That's a really good point. So, like, if you break it down into like, what does it look like the goals of the event are, and what
Yeah.
are your goals? You may find, some are pretty darn close to overlapping, and others far less so. Where you factor that in plus traffic or whatever, maybe there's a lot more of a sort of evaluation approach for picking a show.
Yeah, and and that's where I would say, like, KRC is not the perfect fit for everybody, right? Not so, like, I came up with like a sort of like a bullet pointed list of like, here's questions to ask yourself if you want to table, or if you're thinking about tabling at KRC, and then I would submit these just as a modeling exercise to say, ask yourself similar questions for other shows, right? This isn't about just doing the advertisement for Kids Read Comics, because believe me, we're at capacity. We've got enough people who want to come to the show, and we've got a waiting list. So this isn't about me saying like, hey, come to my show. But if you do want to participate, here's things to ask yourself. Does sharing my knowledge and experience with kids sound like an interesting challenge, right? There are people like Rob who have no problem getting in front of a crowd. But then there are people who come to KRC who don't have any teaching experience at all. And this is an opportunity for them to like sort of workshop their workshop, right? They start out one year, they do a quick draw, and then the next year it's like, okay, I liked what happened there. Maybe I'll participate in one of the comics quick fires or one of those kinds of events. Then the next year, like, okay, I'm ready to do a workshop now. But does that kind of performance sound like an interesting challenge to you? The second question is my work appropriate for families? Right? We occasionally get the person who wants to apply for a table, and they've got like, here's my true crime, gritty noir story, and then I have to we have to tell them like, your stuff is excellent, but I'm just not sure it's the right fit for this particular audience. It's not a service to you to come to our show and not sell anything, right? So it's not about being snobby. It's about like, we're kind of bringing in an audience of little kids, and if your stuff isn't appealing to them, then you're not helping us. We're not helping you. Am I interested in leveling up my table presence? That's something we didn't really get to, Rob. Another like interesting bit of culture that happens at KRC is like, everybody there is like pretty much really friendly, like engaging with, not engaging in a Barker way, but engaging in like this really relaxed, friendly kind of way. You don't get people like staring down at their sketchbook as much, and you don't get
No,
that.
I mean, yeah, inherently you do get it. It can happen from time to time when you're like, oh my god, you just pulled into a drawing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that, and then people might walk by, but chances it'd be very rare if one of the artists um, would 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 I don't know, flat out ignore people, right?
Right.
Uh, and I don't know, like yeah, I have seen that at events where, I mean, yeah, it could be a defense mechanism, could just be different motivation. Where some artists, it's like, yeah, I make a thing, you interact with the thing. Uh, I'm not here to be part of that, right? And that's all right, but that's definitely not this sort of event. Because if you are, put yourself in the shoes of the parents and the kids as they're walking around, and what would you imagine you would want that to be like, right? Probably people to not be overbearing, and to be pretty mellow, but open to that kind of like friendly interaction, when it's like, oh wow, my three kids all reacted to this book on your table, and well, what are you like? Or so there may be like a hi from a parent, and then can you welcome that in that sort of low pressure way and what have you. And if you look around, like there are people with very ornate tables, and people in costume, and
Yeah.
people behind tables in costume and whatnot, right? And some really great sort of setups. Yet it's not like this setup is really this stage for like this blast of a sales pitch, right?
Right. Right. Yeah. Like a neat thing that I see happening, and I'd love to get your input on this, Rob, as a parent. But like for me, one thing I'm like really encouraged by is I see the artists, like the kids will come up and look at the thing. The parents will be like, "Oh, they really like your work," and the artist will then turn to the child and start talking to the child, right? And not in this kind of like, well, I don't see every interaction, but for the most part, I don't see like this kind of condescending, like, "Oh, do you like comics? Here's a comic," but it more like this, like, "Oh, that's neat. Like, what's your favorite thing about it?" Like they just they don't talk over the kid to the parents. They talk with the kid, you know. Um,
Hmm.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
that is very common, and it does have a feel. And then
Yeah.
there is sort of this, when you do kick back, when there is sort of a, oh, as the crowd flows along, there's a gap, and you just sort of kick back and look around, you can see that the room has a feel to it, right? Or
Mhm.
your section of the room, you can't, I don't know if you could really see where everyone is, but whatnot, you get a feel. And honestly, yet another feedback loop into the whole culture of the event.
So
So,
yeah.
like, yeah,
So
are you ready for that?
and actually, we've had a couple of people who come to KRC first, check out the show, then decide whether or not they want a table, right?
Oh yeah.
So that would be another thing. And like this is just common advice. Like if you're interested in going to a show, go to the show and walk around it first and see what it's like before you decide if you want a table at it, and maybe poll a few people on what the culture's like there. But then, okay, if all of this sounds like it's something of interest to you, then the biggest question we get is like, well, how do I get a table? How do I get a table? Well, we actually put out applications every January. So what I've been telling people is mark your calendar, like set a calendar reminder January 1st to go to the KRC site or follow the KRC accounts on Twitter, that's KR Comics, or on Facebook, Kids Read Comics. Around January, we make an announcement about applications for tables are open, and the applications usually close around mid-March, and then I think it's like end of April, mid-April, we usually announce. I want to say early April, actually. We usually let people know whether or not they got a table. Um, so yes, but because table space is limited, we can't just keep that open indefinitely. So if invariably somebody will come along like, "Oh, I just found out about it. Is there still time to get a table?" No, I'm sorry. You have to do it in January. So, uh, and then if you want to propose a workshop, there's something I can point people at. Like, let's say, like, how do I get started doing like workshops at Comic Cons? One of the things that I teach at KRC at the pre-conference every year is my Comic Books: A Pathway to Learning workshop, which comes with the 61-page kit that has out of the box, ready to run workshops. But there's even a workshop in there on developing your own workshop. So you can use like all of the mini workshops in there as cases in point to start building ideas to build your own. But then the final chapter in there is like a section on like building your own workshop. And there's a rubric in there on how to evaluate students' work, but it'll at least give you a framing jumping off point on how to start developing your own proposals and what a proposal looks like, because they're all designed in there. And that's at comicsaregreat.com/ccc. I will link to it in the show notes. Yeah, 61-page PDF that you can use as a starting point. Also, readingwithpictures.org, that has a whole bunch of resources. Drawing words and writing pictures. There's a whole bunch of workshop, like lesson plans on those websites as well. I highly recommend you just look at those two sites and look at their lesson plans, and I'll give you like some great ideas for leading a comics activity. So, I don't know, was there anything else on the ground based on what we talked about today? Like ways to, I don't know,
Well, I mean, I would say, consider checking out other episodes of the Lean Into Art cast where we've covered things like tabling in depth. We've covered, we've covered tabling and conventioning, like from a UX angle, and I think we've hit that a couple of times.
We have. We had Ryan Estrada help us with that one time, and we had Tyler James help us with that another time, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. Oh, that was. Are we remembering also Tyler James had a workshop too?
Oh dear, I gotta look it up.
Part of the lost when we had a big update to the site and whatnot, and so now we still have workshops, but it's just the the ones that we offer, Rob and Jersey, where there was a wonderful time where we had some workshops provided by other artists too, which we're open to reconnecting with that.
Aha.
But
we did talk with, or did we? We did an episode called "The Pros and Cons of Cons." I will pull it up. Find out pros and cons of cons. This is from 2013. Oh my gosh, Rob, we've been doing this a long time.
Yeah, no doubt.
And I know we've talked with Tyler a couple other times on the show. So let's see what else we got here. Creative Work and Business with Tyler James, episode 122.
That was the one. That's the only one he's been on.
Oh my gosh.
He's been mentioned a bajillion times. Not quite as much as the whatever, the uncountable infinite amount that we've mentioned Ryan Estrada. But anyway, and Tyler obviously has tons of great resources over at Comics Tribe, where he does visit this sort of this topic, and has some in-depth articles on the matter. So I mean, that's all food for thought, because obviously there's KRC is a wonderful event, yet it is a one event of many that happen, and maybe you're far away, maybe you're in a different country, and this is all good food for thought for evaluating any of the events that you would consider attending, and considering becoming more a part of, like providing programming and whatnot.
Yeah, because all cons do some kind of programming now in the way of like panel discussions at the very least. If not talks and demos, but more and more are doing workshops as well. So, just wanting to help, wanting to get involved, I think is always a good thing, and no matter what tribe you run in.
Mm-hmm. I think that's an awesome. That's a fantastic thought, and that puts a perfect bow on this, right? Because KRC is a fantastic example, and there's
I'm so glad you got to come this year.
Involved. I am really glad too.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
No, thanks for always coming out. I mean, like, you've been to like a lot of the Kids Read Comics events, and it's
been to 4.
Okay, 4 out of 7. That's a majority.
Yeah,
and
it's awesome.
They've done a lot of different kinds of workshops for us at the show, and I'm super grateful for that too. Like, there's like a lot of development that goes into making a good workshop. I know that you're a little bit more, warmed up to the idea now than maybe you were 5 years ago, but still, I know how much work goes into developing something interesting. So.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, again, like you can get more use out of a creative project, and the workshop that I put on this year was called Paper Prototyping Power Up for Making Video Games. Hey, wordy title, surprise!
But it's got a lot of alliteration, which is a good thing.
It is a fun title, and it was fun to purposefully not involve coding, which I had done. Um, let's see. It feels like more than 1 year, but maybe not. But last year was a lot more technical, right? Or was it the year before?
It was the year before when you led that one in the computer lab.
Yeah.
It was the making video games. It wasn't making video games from comics, was it? It was some variation on that.
Totally, yeah. So I had the underwater tomato ninja one, and
Right.
that became like the raw material I used to create a much more expanded version of that I turned into an ebook.
Which I've just got right here. And you know what? I don't care if this is an advertisement because we should remind people of the neat things that you make. Video game construction kit, Underwater Tomato Ninja Edition, written, coded, and illustrated by Rob Stenzinger. It's at creativecodekit.com. For anyone curious about making video games, includes a fully working game code, sounds, and graphics. Play and change a video game to make it your own. You can get it in EPUB, Kindle, and iBook version. Crying out loud.
Yeah, that was a really fun project, but born out of a workshop that I created for Kids Read Comics.
So cool.
And that's it's funny. Yeah, so there was 2 years where I performed and workshops related to this theme that then all that material went into. That's why I was thinking it did occur over a couple of years. So it's honestly like getting involved is a great reason to if you create like an hour-long experience, that could be grown or morphed or evolved and reused. So and I do intend to do that as well with this the paper prototyping workshop. But
super cool.
Yeah, I mean that's an investment. It's content that I can evolve and oh my gosh, I got some great experience presenting it and getting that sort of the implicit feedback to see how well it performed with the group, what connected, what didn't, and then also the explicit feedback where people are like reacting to things and of course I found a way to poll people during the workshop, like, so how are we doing so far, and then I did the thumb sideways, thumbs up, and thumbs down.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was in the midst of running people through a gauntlet of. But yeah, I see you have more workshops because you have some incredible things available on leanintoart.com/workshops.
As do you.
And
Yeah.
And thank you. The comics fundamentals is amazing. Where you go really in depth. Where like you want to get into making comics, or you want to brush up. That's a fantastic resource where you're going to get like some I forget how many hours that is. I mean, it's like what, 8?
Something like that.
Something like that. It's somewhere in there, 6 to 8 hours. A lot of great.
Let's find out.
Great details and guidance in there. So what?
Looks like
templates.
Yeah, it looks like there's 7 files in there. What do you get? You get coloring with Adobe Photoshop Elements, lettering with Adobe Illustrator, sequences and consequences. So 7 hours of comics instruction, and it's pay what you want. Name your price for it. So you could get it for free if you want to. And then this is one that like I don't talk about enough. I don't think. I mean, it's because it's a topic that's really near and dear to my heart, which is the detailed exploration of comic sound theory and design called FATAM. And it's how to do in very great detail how to letter comics in Adobe Illustrator, but there's also like a whole 2-hour front end on sound design theory for me, like how I think about it. And it's something that my students hear me go on and on about ad nauseum, to the point where I have the wonderful privilege of seeing some of my students go on to high school and college, and I see them become sound design nerds, where like they get angry at poorly designed sound in comics.
This is like so comics fundamentals lays a great foundation, right? But then FATAM is like it's like how, I don't know, it's like fighting the final boss of sound design, where you're like you're training up, and you're doing like this one specific thing that has amazing implications, because of course sound design covers not just sound effects, but of course the sort of any vocalization or whatnot in a comic, things that make sound. So of course the word balloons and everything that goes into it. So there's again, like another awesome resource, well worth checking out.
And there's even more workshops from Rob. We've already talked about 2 of your projects, this Panda and CreativeCodeKit.com. But there's more. Pay what you want for making video games from comics, turning jokes into comics, and storytelling to make your comics UI awesome. So do check those out at leanintoart.com/workshops.
Mm-hmm.
So, hey, are we done, Rob? Did we walk around this thing? Is it time for me to talk about ways that people can help out the show besides getting workshops?
Yeah, I think we're good. We walked around that.
If you found this discussion useful or interesting, a great way you can let people know, or let us know, a great way to say thank you to us, is to go to iTunes, give the show a star review, however many stars you think the show deserves. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, giving it a thumbs up. That helps more people find the show. That's a nice, inexpensive, and low-risk, low-friction way to give us a pat in the back. But if you get something really out of the show, and you're like, man, I look forward to every episode of Lean Into Art. It makes me so happy. I love listening to you guys. I know all of your inside jokes. Somebody at KRC was asking me about my bag. Actually, it was Jeremy Hobbs. He says, like, as he was walking behind me, he's like, is that the perfect bag? I'm like, aha, you listen to the show. If you're one of those kinds of folks who like really listen to everything we do, you could go to patreon.com/leanintoart, and you can, chip us $1 a month, tip us $1 a month, and that'll, help make the show more sustainable. Also, it gives you access to extra stuff. So like the extra leans that we do, the shows we do in between the main shows, but also we do these every once in a while. We do a Patreon only open mic post, Circle of Trust, where we start a thread of discussion that only can take place between people who support us on Patreon. So that's at patreon.com/leanintoart. Anything else, Rob?
No, that's great. I mean, we thank you very much to our patrons. By all means, when you go to patreon.com, you can see the list of patrons that we have. And they're awesome. Thank you very much.
Yeah, seriously. Thanks, guys and gals, for making this thing more sustainable. It means the world to us to know that this stuff has value to you guys. All right. Well, guess what, Rob? We'll be back in 2 weeks, right?
That's right. Well, I mean, yes. If you go to Patreon, you can check out Extra Lean. That's the
next week.
Podcast we do every other week. But in between, of course, we do this one every other week. So yes, we'll be back 2 weeks with another episode of Lean Into Art.
And until then, everybody, thanks for downloading, watching, and listening. I have been Jersey Drozd of leanintoart.com and Jersey on Twitter.
And I've been Rob Stenzinger of leanintoart.com and Rob Stenzinger on Twitter.
Okay, bye.
Show notes for this episode can be found at leanintoart.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at the user leanintoart, and you can reach us via email at leanintoart@gmail.com. And remember, leaners aren't wieners. Thanks for listening.
All right, I'm going to kill the stream, but before I go, Rob, what's with this picture you took of me?
Which one?
This one that I got up on the screen. Why am I looking like that?
I think I surprised you or something. And there was I don't know. I was one of those pictures where it was a fun moment. I was like, it's funny. Yeah.
All right.
It's what do they call that? It's very in the moment and casual.
Candid.
It's a candid shot.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to kill the stream, everybody. Thanks for watching and hanging out with us. We'll see you guys in 2 weeks.
Thank you.